Media about war is normally about the soldiers and the horrors they have to face. This applies especially to World War II, which is understandable as World War II is considered the biggest war going off of deaths, with a death toll of somewhere between 70 to 80 million lives. However, there isn't much media that speaks about the everyday civilians and what they went through. Now, I'm not talking about the people who were specifically targets for their ethnic or religious beliefs. I'm talking about the normal civilians who were targets because they chose to fight against what was happening. A lot of people tend to have the misconception that civilians in Germany at the time were all brainwashed and believed in the propaganda that they were being fed. However, the truth is there were a lot of people who disagreed, but they couldn't say so publicly out of fear. However, some people decided to fight back however they could, forming small resistant groups throughout Germany doing their part to fight fascism. So when I discovered a game that was made to tell their story, it piqued my interest. This game being Through the Darkest of Times. Through the Darkest of Times was made by Pink Bucket Games and was released in 2020. Their goal was to tell and show the horrors that was Germany from 1933 to 1945. The game doesn't follow a real organization but is inspired by the ones that did exist, like the Red Orchestra. The game is not necessarily set in stone or historically accurate for the fact you play as your own character, however the goal is for you to experience what Germany was like for many people at that time. I also want to mention this video will cover some themes that many might find disturbing, and I have no real agenda for this video except for showing how difficult it was for many back then, as well as showing how people from different belief systems could unite against evil.
I remember when Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor in 1933, the masses cheered. But we were not among them. We knew that the times would be bad now. We knew that the Nazi threats were not empty. That those people meant what they said. We had to do something. We couldn't just stay silent. But we also knew that it can cost us our heads.
We start the game by making our character, and after some fiddling, I made the closest representation of myself that I could. We are then introduced to some text. On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed to be the Chancellor of Germany. That same night, 3 friends meet in a back room of a pub and commit to resist what is about to come against an inhumane regime. Week 1, we get to see a local newspaper about how Hitler managed to get in. We get to see 3 friends sitting at a table and talking about the news. Roman mentions how he cannot believe that Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor. However, I mentioned that we knew this was coming, didn't we? The other member mentions that they need to find support if they wish to be successful. However, I disagree and mention we need to act fast. Roman is pleased with this, however, Esther believes we are insane. I explain that why would anyone support us if all we do is hide? I decide that helping the persecuted is the most important job to get done. After this interaction, we get to see the strategy map and get to see everyone's stats. We get to see their abilities and what they are good at, as well as their political and ideological beliefs are. All these stats will influence their capabilities and what they're good at, as well as their personal traits. Both myself and Esther are social democrats, while Roman is a Catholic conservative who is a misogynist and unemployed. But in 1933, beggars can't be choosers. We then set off to work to find new members and supporters while finding funds. We managed to find a new member in Antonio Hansen. I probably utterly butchered that name and I apologize, my German's not the greatest. This applies for future names as well. One night while heading home on our bike, the streets are empty until I see a group ganging up on someone. I decide to get closer. Once there, we get to see 3 men in brown uniforms with the iconic armbands surrounding a civilian. Instead of leaving, I decide to get closer. The loudest member out of the 3 yells at the man, calling him a dirty Jew, while pushing the man down on the ground while the others support him. We are then given 3 options, to turn around and leave, which never crossed my mind. However, the real challenge was deciding on whether or not to intervene directly or stand and watch. One can make us a clear target and the other gives us the chance to possibly intervene while not taking as much risk. So I put safety first and decide to watch. One of the brown shirts throws the civilian's hat and tells him to get it. This is when we step in and pick up the hat. The brown shirts are furious about this and tell us to put the hat back. This action of picking up the hat has gained their attention. They ask what I want. Given the options, I choose to calm them down, as insulting or fighting them are unlikely to end well. I let them know that they have won, and there's no need for violence. I keep talking to him while the old man sneaks away. They threaten me, but I keep stroking their ego by agreeing with them. Ultimately, this plan worked as the civilian has gotten away, but now that the brown shirts are aware, we are in danger. I play dumb while they turn around and I sneak to my bike and escape while laughing at them. We then get to choose how we view that situation, on whether we'll have to get used to this stuff happening, or that we'll never get used to it. Sadly, this would only get worse and more violent in time, and this is just a hint of things to come. The following weeks, we go to a protest to spread our message, and we deal with some internal issues with members arguing over political beliefs. Esther mentions she despises Roman and that his views contribute nothing to the group, as everyone else is a social democrat. However, I mentioned to her that I will not kick him out or her, as we're a group with differing views, but we're working together to fight against the regime. I also keep him around as he would be able to communicate and gain support from certain groups that the rest of us couldn't. One night in a bar, we see a man run in yelling about how the Reichstag is burning, and that the communists did it. For anyone who may not know, the Reichstag is the home of the German parliament. We leave the bar and walk with a group to watch the fire. Once there, we speak to members in the crowd. I approach a man in a Great War uniform and ask him for his thoughts. He instantly tells us the communists did it, or the Jews, the same thing really. The man then gets loud, claiming this will be their death sentence. We then approach a woman in a fur coat. She mentions how this is all happening due to the aggressive little clown, referring to Mustache Man, who took over. She mentions this looks like his style, but we didn't hear that from her. Before she leaves, she hands us a card to her club and vanishes. We then talk to a biggish guy and ask him, who do we think did this? He instantly becomes defensive, saying that he didn't do it. We reassure him and he just says that the Nazis obviously did it. Then he leaves. We then head home very shortly after. This is the first real major event that we play through in this game. The burning took place on the 27th of February 1933. The Nazis then used this to forward their agenda by claiming it was a communist plot to seize power. After the fire, the Nazi Party used this as an excuse to implement the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and gave the government broad powers to suppress opposition. This decree paved the way for the Enabling Act, which granted Hitler the powers to basically become a dictator, and allowed the Nazis to bypass the parliament, effectively establishing a one-party state. We got to see a bit of what people believed at the time, and even now, there is no guarantee on who started the fire, but many believe that the Nazis did it, while others believed it was the communists. Either way, this was a massive step on Germany changing. We would then spend the next few weeks expanding our operations, stealing money, gaining supporters, and fighting for the cause, until we meet up with an old friend. This friend of ours was in the same social democratic party of ourselves for many years. Gunther moved for a new job, and we haven't seen him for a long time apparently. We greet him, and then we get our first hint of something odd going on. He says he's doing fine, then he corrects himself saying he would actually say he's doing great, as he gets to work in an office. We tell him that we're doing okay for the circumstances, and then Gunther drops a bomb on us. He mentions that he understands we aren't happy just like he was 6 months ago. However, now he believes that Hitler was what Germany needed. I ask why he thinks that. He then returns my question with another. Why did we support the Social Democratic Party? I say to build a society without violence. He agrees and mentions how Hitler has been taking care of German workers and that he gives them safety and hope. He believes that no matter whether you own a factory or work in it, we are all members of a community working to improve Germany. I then mentioned the one big flaw in his logic. This new world isn't very inclusive. If you are a Jewish, a gypsy, disabled or black, all these people are excluded. Then our dear friend says maybe it's right to exclude them. Maybe they are a threat. Obviously I disagree, but Gunther just calls me a dreamer and mentions how I should actually have a realistic dream and join them. This is when he reveals that he's a member of the party by putting their badge down on the bench. I politely decline and leave. After this, I decide not to stay in touch with the man in the future. Sadly, in the real world, this happened a lot. People would change their ideological view for a few reasons. The biggest was for the fact that the mood in Germany was grim and many people felt like their government wasn't doing anything. So when a man with a big personality made promises of helping them, and by praising them, he took advantage of the poor and the beaten down to rally behind him. This was a snowball effect, as the people who support him would start to convince others around them to support him as well. Humans are simple creatures in a lot of ways. This is why we have trends today. Humans want to fit in and be a part of something, and sometimes that said thing isn't always good. There's also the fact that if you're a part of a group and they're being praised, of course you want to continue supporting them. It's benefiting you, and for a lot of people, it would be hard to not be tempted by such promises. It's also a really hard thing to stand up and fight against causes like this, out of fear or being ridiculed or possibly hurt. A great example of this mindset, if you've ever seen it, is the study where they put an average person in a room full of actors. They then asked the group, what shape is this? You see a square, right? Well, they found that if everyone around you said it was a triangle, a lot of you would agree with the group out of fear for being judged. Not everyone is like this, of course, but more than you would think. The next couple of weeks involve a prison break for one of our members' husbands, who has been arrested for no reason. We are successful, however, moving around the city is a lot harder with the increase of stormtroopers roaming around. One Saturday, while going to buy groceries, we see a commotion at the front of the store. We see the grey shirts standing out front of the store, and we see the Star of David painted on the storefront with the word Jew. We read the signs that the stormtroopers are holding, which declares that they are parasites and that the true Germans should not buy from them. People try to enter, but they get turned away. We speak to the people around us. One woman says she doesn't know what is happening and she doesn't want to know, choosing to stay blind. We speak to another older woman this time who says they are getting what they deserve, referring to how they cannot steal their money anymore. Finally, we speak to another man who mentions how it's happening all over the city. This event was another step in Hitler's grand plan. He had his enemies, in quotation marks, and he decided to host a day-long boycott against them. Anti-Jewish policies functioned on two primary levels. Legal measures to expel the Jews from society and strip them of their rights and property, while also engaging in campaigns of abuse, terror, and violence of varying proportions. There was one goal: to make the Jews leave Germany. This was just another step in their plan to get rid of them, as if they could not make money, they could not afford to live. Sometime later, we get to experience one of the most famous moments of Germany around the time. We attend one of the book burnings at a university. There are thousands of people while a man talks over the microphone. We stand in the crowd while a person approaches us saying that we don't look well. He asks why we aren't joining in, so I play along and pretend to support the cause, as it's not the smartest thing to make myself a target in such a large group. He asks us if we were talking to one of those authors of the books, what would we say? I can't keep on acting like this, and after some time it's revealed that he is an author, a man known as Eric Kastner. While talking to him, he kind of realizes the danger that he's in as someone recognizes him. We help distract the students and let him make his escape. The book burning in Germany was another big event that really shows how many people supported the Nazis. Eric, the author we meet, is a real man who did attend one of these events. He wrote a lot of humorous poems for children's books. He would thankfully survive the war and tell his experiences. Weeks later, we have made some more progress. We have spread propaganda, gained more supporters. We even stole crucial intel and stole a uniform. One day, while heading home, we feel like we were being watched. We keep our eyes peeled. We head to the pub to see if anyone is following. After a while, and not recognizing anyone, we head home. We watch the streets from our window and eventually fall asleep. We hear some noises during the night and go to check it out, and we see a man looking at our window. We dismiss it, as there really is no way of even knowing if the man was actually looking at us. This is just a small part of the paranoia that these people would go through regularly. You never really know who you could trust. People would turn on one another for personal gain all the time. Some did it as a bargaining chip to save themselves, others to get food, and so on. The amount of stress for the average person during this time was not ideal. However, for people who were targets and who were resisting, it was even more stressful, as all it would take is some bad luck or a simple mistake to be found out, and people would disappear through the night. If you want to see an extreme version of what these people probably felt like they were going through, read or listen to George Orwell's audiobook 1984. The following week, we would lose a member who took their own life. That being Esther. She could not handle the stress. After her death, I would go to visit a supporter. There's very little movement on the street, so I decide to hurry up and get to my destination. I ring the doorbell and a woman is not pleased to see me. She then talks about the raids and people getting arrested. We then get to hear the story from a young girl, who talks about how her father was being beaten and all she could do was cry. The men then put her father in the back of a truck and took him away. Later she would go to find her father with her mother. However, this would end poorly as they would try and take her mother as well. Luckily they escaped, however the girl had to stay with our contact as her mother went into hiding. We promised the little girl that we'll keep an eye out for her father and see if we could find him. While walking down the street, we see the truck. We would run after it and find it heading into a forest. We would sneak through, finding bags hanging from trees. We would open one of these bags and find the little girl's father. We then meet some text. The NSDAP is declared to be a Germany-only legal party. The Gestapo and the SS go on and arrest tens of thousands of people and send them to concentration camps. We would learn that our group is strong enough to survive this change. Now, the event with the bags, I was unable to find any sources on the topic, as my lack of fluent or even basic German kind of makes it hard to Google or research certain things. However, this isn't too hard to believe.
The bloodshed in Köpenick wasn't the first event of its kind, and it likely won't be the last. SA and police arrested tens of thousands of political opponents. Many were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. The Nazis banned all political parties except the NSDAP and made it clear that from now on they alone ruled the country. In November, Hitler won re-election with 92% of the vote. We went into hiding. It felt like there was nothing left we could do.
Chapter 2 starts with us getting on the most iconic and safe aircraft in human history in 1936, the Hindenburg. We're going on a trip with a friend of ours. We join in the cheering with the crowd to blend in, even if it's a little half-heartedly. We enter the Hindenburg, where our friend mentions we should restart the resistance. After dropping that bombshell right in the open, he leaves to talk to another person. We decide to walk around and we make a discovery, an American news reporter, where we have an interesting conversation. He gives us some subtle foreshadowing by mentioning how he is a danger seeker, as if he wasn't, he wouldn't be in a massive balloon filled with hydrogen. He talks about how he had his doubts about the government, but now that he has been here for 3 months, he has changed his mind and that he will let the readers back in America know about his observations. The reason for this is obviously because the German government got permission to host the Olympics, so they spent a lot of time fixing up and changing their image for the rest of the world, hiding what they have really done. He mentions how he doesn't think America would like to be told what to do and think, however he reckons that it works well for the German people. He mentions how the Jews are being treated seems to be an exaggeration and that the city looks great. I inform him that this is not the truth and that I'll tell him more, but not in such a public space. We then go and meet a woman who is very uppity. She explains how she is very wealthy, maybe not so much as she used to be, but still wealthy. She looks down on everyone who is poor. She also mentions how Hitler has helped the German people. Most notably, how he got them out of the Treaty of Versailles, the treaty that was imposed at the end of World War I, which was extremely harsh on Germany and was a massive problem for the economy. This was why the German people were so desperate for a leader who would promise to get them out of it, and the fact that he was successful definitely added to his ability to gain supporters. After this, we meet up with our friend again and we talk about the Olympics and how this will be the opportunity to show the world what is really going on. So we are back at it with our resistance to spread the word. We go and gain more supporters and make new contacts. One day, heading home, we run to our neighbour, and she's very happy to see us. She mentions how today is the big day, and not just because it's Hitler's birthday, it's the day her son gets to join the Hitler Youth, through the indoctrination ceremony. She asks us to join, and not to draw suspicion, I agree. We travel, and I agree and praise the city to make her feel safe. She then says, "I knew you were a good person and loyal to the Reich and Hitler." I ask her what she means, however she mostly avoids it by saying, "because of your past." That's going to cause some anxiety. We attend the event where we listen to the Führer's speech. He says, "We want to be one people and shall become that people. We want this people to be obedient." The crowd cheers, and I wonder if they're even listening to this man. The Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls was created to start shaping the minds of young people to conform to the Reich's ideology. By 1940, this group would have 7.2 million members. Their goal was to subtly brainwash these children into believing in their cause wholeheartedly.
Now, it was in the activities, I think, that my life differed from that of a normal boy who went to public school and went home after school was over and had a normal life at home. Our life was much more structured and it was much more directed, so that whatever Hitler wanted to do with us, we imbibed in a very careful fashion. That is, we were not aware of being indoctrinated. We were not being aware of what was being done to us. It was all a very, very subtle process. By the time that the war ended in 1945, when I was 15, I had become a Nazi without ever really being aware that I was one.
We spend the next few weeks gaining more supporters until one day where we go to meet an old friend at a cafe. When we see him, he seems unwell. The man is nearly unrecognizable, and the reason for this is because he spent 3 years in a concentration camp. We asked him if he would want to join our cause. However, he admits that he won't join as he fears he won't be able to resist interrogation and turning on us if he ever got caught, to avoid being sent back to the camp. This is something that happened quite a bit before the war actually started. Being sent to a concentration camp wasn't necessarily a death sentence. Many people did get released in the beginning, and most were mostly designed to re-socialize political opponents and people who didn't side with their agenda. Most people would get released within 3 months to a year. The most difficult prisoners were sentenced for 3 years. Most people after leaving these camps were broken in one way or another. Some more weeks pass, we get some explosives, have some small disputes. Roman is finally living up to his name by being a misogynist, wondering why we have a female in the group. I tell him because she is her own person and can do what she likes, and that they both will stay, and I'm not kicking her out for being a woman. Sometime later, we meet up with the journalist from the Hindenburg and we watch the Olympics. We witness the famous photo of Hitler receiving flowers from a little girl, and we watch as he gives the shortest speech he has ever given. We talk to the journalist, and he makes it clear that the American public think Germany is perfectly okay. The Olympic Games in Germany at the time was a big thing, and the Germans overall got the most gold medals, as well as medals in total, with the Americans coming in second place. However, one big positive at the time was thanks to Jesse Owens, an African-American man who won 4 gold medals for America. This record would be held for 48 years, but most notably, it really put a damper on the Nazis' message of how the Aryan race was superior. A couple weeks later, we would make our way to a camp where the remaining people, or at this time mostly known as gypsies, were being sent and held. They were removed from the city before the Olympics started to ensure they wouldn't be a problem. We enter and meet a family, and it's revealed that their children had been taken regularly to be studied. Our interaction gets interrupted as the police come to take the children again. This ends with the police attacking the civilians. We take some photos and leave before we get caught. This camp would ultimately be sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1943 in 6 separate runs.
No one outside the camp knew of the events of that day. No one wanted to know. The new Germany was being celebrated in Berlin, as if it were a country like any other. Hitler lied, and the world wanted to believe him. In 1938, Britain and France gave in to Germany's aggressive demands to annex the Sudetenland. Soon thereafter, Austria followed. When the Wehrmacht invaded Poland, Britain and France finally decided to declare war on Germany. An unleashed Wehrmacht spread murder and annihilation across Europe. The Nazis kept their promises, and we were devastated.
We now jump to the war in 1941, and fascism has spread widely. We're attending a lunch with the Manholts. The husband Volker, who is a soldier, and his wife Annie, a stay-at-home mum, are hosting the event. We eat, and Klaus, their son, who doesn't have great table manners, ends up taking my food. The mother mentions how they invited the Gutmans for dessert. Klaus immediately points out that they are Jews, and why did she invite them? His mother just sends him away. I talk a little bit with Volkner, where he reveals that there are rumors that they're going to attack Russia, which he agrees isn't the smartest move. The Gutmans arrive and they talk about how they were kicked out of their homes, and they have to share with other people now, as well as how they are no longer allowed to drive their car. Then Klaus, the little Nazi, comes running back with his nose bleeding. He says that the Gutman's son punched him in the face for no reason. I doubt this and push for the full story, where it's revealed that Klaus was insulting the other boy quite heavily. Volkner would strike his son, who wouldn't back down, so his son got hit again. After this, the Gutmans leave. Volkner mentions he doesn't know his son anymore. I mention how it isn't his fault though, and that he's just been indoctrinated. The next week, we learn that one of our members has been drafted, but was able to get out of it thanks to having a doctor who gave him a fake note that allowed him to get out of service. We also learn that Germany has attacked Russia, starting the war from both sides. After this, we head to the movies to meet an informant and get information on what is happening on the east. The cinema is mostly empty, no one's watching these days. We find out how the Germans are treating civilians and the Russians, with them being executed. We ask whether this may be just the SS committing these crimes and not normal soldiers. However, our contact confirms that these crimes are being done from normal soldiers. We then leave with this information. More weeks pass where we help hide people who are wanted by the government, and we nearly get shot by the Gestapo. During one of these weeks, we experience an air raid. We head into the bunker where our neighbours are. We have Klaus showing up again, as apparently himself and another boy, Herman, are in charge. They ask to check to make sure everyone is in there, and it seems that's the case. We instantly get into a fight with Hildegard, an old woman, and for the sake of me not constantly butchering that lady's name, I'm just going to call her Hilda. She claims that the British bombers won't make it here as Hitler promised they wouldn't. I ask her if she's so sure, why is she even in the bunker? She then instantly goes into threatening me passively. We change the topic and talk to the boys. Suddenly a bang occurs in the distance and the lights go out. I check myself for wounds and I'm okay. When we get some light, a woman known as Miss Obst is comforting her husband, who is trembling. Apparently he can't handle the dark. Then Hilda decides to insult the man. I try to calm her down, but she keeps going. I eventually tell her to shut up, then she gets hit in the head with a tin can. Miss Obst instantly becomes my hero as she threatens Hilda with another can. She then goes on to mention how her husband fought in the Great War and that it took his soul. Another bomb lands closer this time. We then hear banging on the outside of the shelter. It's the Gutmans. Klaus and the other boy do not want to let them in as they are Jews. The boys refuse to let them in, but I continue to beg, hoping they'll change their minds. The boys still refuse and I get even more aggressive, telling them to open it now. Hilda the cow goes on to rant that her son is in charge and the laws say that no Jews will be let in, and she will report us if we let anyone else in. As I'm about to say that she will regret it if they don't let them in, another can flies through the sky and hits the wall next to her. Miss Obst mentions how that if she doesn't let the Gutmans in, she'll hit her again. I back her play and we eventually get the Gutmans in the bunker. Once we leave, Hilda threatens us, however, I know she won't report us as it would make her son look bad. A few weeks later, I would run into Hilda again, who tells me that the Gutmans were taken by the Gestapo. She then mentions if she should be able to move into their apartment now. I decide there's no point arguing with her on how messed up this is, and just go to find the Gutmans. I head to where they're being held at a synagogue. Once there, I see trucks leaving with groups of people shoved in the back. The police don't want me getting any closer, so I have to stand back. The rest of the people cramped in the synagogue are being forced to walk to their destination. We search the crowd and see the Gutmans. I offer to help them, and they say there is nothing that can be done. While talking to the father of the family, he starts to cry. He mentions why must they take his son? Why can't they kill him and spare his son? After, I step back and think to myself, there's no such thing as a new home in the East, and I'll never get to see the Gutmans again.
Like the Gutmans, thousands of Jews were deported to the East. Trains departed daily. We didn't know for sure what happened to them, but the rumors we heard were terrible. Little did we know that the truth was so much worse. After a series of German victories, the Allies began to fight back. German cities were regularly attacked and destroyed by Allied bombers. In the winter of 1942, the Wehrmacht lost more than 300,000 soldiers at Stalingrad. The majority were killed, not just by bullets, but by cold and hunger too. The rest were captured. Many of us thought that the war was now over. But it wasn't over. Even though the Wehrmacht had been on retreat for 2 full years, the regime had not given up. On the contrary, the weaker they were, the more aggressive and ruthless they became.
We jump to 1944, where the Germans are no longer winning the war, but losing it. And things are starting to look pretty bad for the Nazis, but not for us. We're invited to our neighbor's Christmas dinner, the ones who have Klaus for a son. I bring a drink to their house and take a seat at the table, and we talk, and they mention how Klaus is on the front lines. While having dinner, we keep having a conversation until there's a knock at the door. When the door opens, we end up facing 3 members of the Wehrmacht. They ask if Klaus is there, and we mention he is on the front lines, and then it's revealed that he is a deserter. They search the apartment, but they're unsuccessful in finding the child. We are then ordered to get rid of the candles on the Christmas tree. They make a big scene, they interrogate us basically, but they have no real cause to arrest or do anything. After heading home, I get a knock on the door. It's Klaus and his mother. She asks if we can hide him. After everything is done, should I help him? Ultimately, I decided that I would help the boy, as I hope he will change his ways. And ultimately, it isn't his fault for being brainwashed. Weeks go by, I help fellow members to find coal for their homes, as the cold is becoming deadly. We also help other members survive throughout the city. A few weeks later, we're riding our bike through the rubble of what used to be Berlin. I take my time taking in the sights. Suddenly an air raid siren goes off. While riding, I think about that there is nothing left here to destroy. A young boy yells at me to take cover. I don't bother arguing and enter the shelter with everyone else. I look around and find a spot to rest. I decide to stay near a pillar, then take a seat at a bench. While there, I see a boy standing nearby. He's trying to hide a golden star on his shirt. I lend him my jacket so he can cover it. We talk and he mentions that he knows he's not meant to be here, as being a Jew he wasn't allowed in the bunker, but he was just too scared to stay out there. While having our conversation, I mentioned that I didn't know that there are any Jews left in Berlin. He mentions that there isn't many left, but he works in an ammunition factory, so he's kind of essential. While talking, I offer him a piece of bread. Then the scene that stuck with me the most occurs. A bomb had landed on the shelter, and when I tell you how this made my heart stop for a second, I'm not joking. I was playing at 11 PM at night, and the sudden tone shift threw me. We hear screams and cries of children. I look for the boy, and he helps me get out of the station. We make it our time to witness the Waffen SS attend to the wounded. The boy makes his leave, and so do I before they notice us. Air raids were devastating for civilians during World War II from both sides. We mostly hear about the London bombings, however the German population received just as much. However, there is one big difference on why we hear more about London than Germany. The reason for this is due to the Nazis' propaganda at the time saying that the planes weren't actually making it to Berlin, even though everyone could tell that this wasn't the case. This scene stands out the most in this entire game. The reason for this is it works so well. The game does have intense moments, but the entire time you're playing, it's kind of calm or eerie music and text. So the sudden bang and the screams really mess with you. It's a good glimpse into what civilians went through during this time. So many civilians ended up with trauma as you never really know when a bomb was going to fall or where it was going to fall. Another interesting thought is whether I decide to go near where the train was, where everyone on that train lost their lives. They didn't survive the bomb. Or would I have died if I sat at the bench instead of the pillar? All these thoughts would go through anyone's mind. However, there was really no way of knowing. More weeks pass and the Allies are getting closer. One day, coming home, we hear a commotion coming from our neighbour's house, who is a proud Nazi. We enter his apartment and he is packing. He is trying to flee before the Soviets get there, as they won't be happy to see him. The man is known as Otto, and when he sees us, he asks me what I am doing there. I play it smooth and ask him where his uniform is. He gets flustered and makes an excuse about seeing his mother. I know I shouldn't, but I finally decide to call someone out, and I call him a coward and a rat. I tell him that history will remember what he has done, what they have all done, before he storms out. This might have been a risk to my health, but it was definitely worth it to call him out on it. The war is coming to an end and the Nazis are becoming desperate. They start sending children from the Hitler Youth to defend the city. We see 3 boys heading down the street on a mission when we're meeting with Bruno, a supporter. We try to convince them to stand down, however, they're adamant on defending the bridge. Everything we do doesn't work, so we go get their teacher to help us try and convince them. We tell them that they won't survive as they are 3 boys fighting the entire Red Army on their own. However, nothing will convince them. They're adamant to hold their ground no matter what. So we decide to sabotage them and shove their supplies into the river. The leader then fires a shot, and we convince them that they have no means to fight. They leave. However, they would report their old teacher, who would be sentenced to death for interfering. The boys would testify against him. Sadly, at this time, desperation was real and many children were sent to fight. Many would lose their lives pointlessly. A lot of them would fight to the bitter end solely because they were so influenced and brainwashed into believing they were doing the right thing. A few more weeks pass and the war is finally coming to an end and the Red Army is making their way through Berlin. However, the horrors aren't done yet. We see a building with a white flag hanging from it. We watch some SS soldiers pull up and run into the building and we follow. We hear gunshots then hide as the soldiers run back down the stairs. I enter the room and see a little boy crying in the corner. There is a dead body of an older man and a woman. The boy mentions how his grandpa hung up the white flag as that is what the German soldier told him to do, as the war was practically over. The SS, however, did not agree with this, and when they got in there, they executed the man and the woman. I comfort the boy by telling him the Nazis have lost the war. All we can do now is hang up the flag. And as we do, we see a Russian tank with soldiers on it. They wave at us, and we wave back. The war is over. The game ends on a peaceful note, with all of the members at a cafe talking about whether history will learn from this, and although the war is over, it isn't done. The rebuilding must start. We close on a quote: "You are not responsible for what happened, but you're certainly responsible for preventing it from happening again." This quote comes from a Holocaust survivor.
Our fight wasn't over. We all knew that. Though the inferno now subsided, the murderous spark that set the world ablaze endured. And so did the murderers. The leaders and the willing executioners fading into the woodwork, waiting for the next opportunity to lead the world into darkness. No, our fight wasn't over. In the rays of this afternoon's sun, our group took an oath. The darkest of times might be over for now, but our fight was not. We swore to keep fighting until the last of these criminals was brought to justice. We would not stop fighting until the last sign of Nazism was eradicated from the face of the earth. Our goal was to build a new world of peace and freedom. This was our responsibility to our murdered friends and relatives. This we swear.
This character that we play as may have been fictional, but the things that happened, the horrors that occurred, the bravery of the people like this, are all real. The fighting in Berlin was brutal. Many people lost their lives right until May 7th, 1945. The years afterwards would be long and many horrific revelations will occur afterwards. However, the people who resisted the Nazis shall always be remembered for their bravery to save the lives of others. This game isn't perfect, however it does its job. It lets you get a small glimpse of a small part of the war. One that isn't mentioned or talked about nearly enough. Germany as a whole gets painted as the villain during this time. However, it's important to remember that there were good people putting their lives on the line to help those in need. Or there were those who disagreed but were too scared to stand up for what was right, or for those who just didn't know any better. Berlin was destroyed and it took a long time to rebuild. War is horrific for everyone involved, even when you win. Through the darkest of times shows us how stressful it can really be, how it damages people, sometimes beyond repair, and how evil can spread. It shows us that no matter how dark the situation may seem, there can always be hope. You may think that you are alone and cannot change the world. However, every small action you take has an effect. Resistant groups during World War II were normal people just like me or you. They used their own skills to stand up for what was right, and some of them were responsible for the biggest blows the Nazis received during World War II. 70 to 85 million people died during World War II, and most of which were civilians. So many lives lost, so much potential lost, all due to an upset nation, a man with a mustache with the ability to brainwash people. I'm glad that Paint Bucket Games made through the darkest of times. It's not a perfect game, however it does its job of getting us to reflect and remember what the cost of war really is. As although this is a game, real war is hardly the same. Well, that took a somber ending. I knew it would get dark and I tried to keep it not too doom and gloom, but man, I won't lie, working on this project took a toll on me a little, more than I would have thought. If you appreciate this video and topic and you wish to learn more, I'll have some links to some books revolving around World War II from people who experienced it that I really liked and I think you might as well. One I cannot recommend any less is The Happiest Man on Earth. It is one of the greatest books I've ever listened to, as I listen to them while I work at times. And The Happiest Man on Earth is one of the few books that actually made me shed a tear, which isn't often. However, I'll also link some other books I really liked from a German soldier during World War II and his experiences fighting the Russians. And I'll also have a book recommendation for a woman who hid people from the Nazis during World War II. Besides all of that, if I don't see you again, remember to stay safe, live life to the fullest, and peace.